On to the home builders. Talk about affordability. Can you share with us the load of taxation and regulation from the time a individual or a company has a raw piece of land till the time you hand the keys? Mr. Finnigan, you'd probably be good at this because you operate in the GTA. The keys to the owner, how much of a tax load and regulatory load of cost is part of the purchase price of a home in Toronto today?
Well, in Toronto today, it would be in excess of 20%. It would be made up mostly of, to start with, development charges and levies taxes, which would make up, in most municipalities today, between $60,000 and $70,000 directly paid by the builder. That's added to the price of the house. On top of that would be further permit fees and charges made during the development process. It would add probably another $15,000 to $20,000, and then on top of that, there's the final HST figure, which is the tax on a tax. So in those cases, that could be upwards of $100,000 based on the average.
I had one builder tell me recently in the Toronto area it was 50% of a cost of a house. So somewhere maybe between 20 and 50.
Depending on the final price of the house, and it's regressive. That a smaller house, less expensive house is a larger amount.
So it's not the builders and the developers who are paying that. Who's paying it?
The home buyer is paying it.
The home buyer is paying it. So when we talk about affordability, one of the things governments, I think, should do on all three levels, in my opinion, is to get a handle on the fact that the cash cow they believe housing is actually stopping the young family from getting their first house. Would you agree with that comment?
I would agree with that, yes.
You also brought up in your presentation something that alluded to, I believe, at the end, although you didn't use these words, but I will, because our government went down this road of a renovation tax credit. You tied it, I believe, to energy efficiency projects, things that would reduce greenhouse gases and things like that. Am I correct in interpreting that as what we had done previously, which was provided a renovation tax credit?
Yeah, the previous government did put in the home accessibility tax credit, and we would propose that for addressing climate change, the exact same thing can be done for energy efficiency.
Excellent.
Association, given my former background. My colleagues' questions about affordability, it's somewhat interesting and ironic when you talk about levies, municipal levies, because in Ontario, for example, it's the only province where municipalities actually pay for housing. So levies that are collected through building applications, part of the municipal tax roll, and then have to go pay when the Harris government downloaded social programs like housing. So we actually have to pay for social housing through property taxes as well as things like municipal levies. Same with transit, same with childcare. So it would be my assumption that these would be the types of things that you can't do one without the other. You can't reduce levies for home builders without providing funding for the services that are needed. So the investments that the federal government has announced in terms of transit and sanitary wastewater facilities, I would think the home builders associations would see this as a major plus, because if you have these services to land, that's only going to increase value and help take the burden off so that levies don't continue to increase.
We've certainly been hugely supportive of investments by government in core infrastructure to address affordability and alleviate the need for development charges and taxes. Our concern with development taxes is when they go beyond the needs of the immediate units and start funding things that go far beyond those immediate units and the rest of the community, which would be typically something that ought to be paid by the more broad tax base so that everybody benefits from it. The same would hold true for social housing units. You really don't want to just force new home buyers of new homes, to be the ones who are financing social housing units. Ideally, society is financing social housing units, and you're still not saddling particularly new first-time home buyers with having to pay for social housing, and that's where we would look for a different approach to things.
I do have one question I want to ask the home builders, and anybody else for that matter, and it was mentioned in somebody's presentation, and that's the renovation black market. I mean, there's three there's lost revenues for government, there's the undermining of the construction industry itself, and there's loss of guarantee for those people that use cash, payment in cash to those people doing the renovations. How do you kill that black market?
We're doing a lot of work in this area on actually information for Canadians. We have a Get It in Writing campaign right now that we're actually collaborating with Revenue Canada on. It's been on for many, many years, but has been reinvigorated over the past couple to educate Canadians about making a smart choice when it comes to renovation because, as you said, everybody loses, frankly, including the homeowners who are choosing to go this route in many instances. And it's one of the reasons why when we look to activities like what are you trying to achieve from a public policy perspective, for example, climate change, for example, aging in place, for example, even helping first-time homebuyers through a renovation tax credit for a first-time homebuyer even. All of these things, it doesn't take much. As long as you have a program that requires a homeowner to get a receipt, you in turn then attack the underground economy. And we saw it through the home renovation tax credit in 2009. We saw it through the eco-energy retrofit program for energy efficiency. When you get a homeowner to take a receipt, and it doesn't have to be a receipt for much, as soon as you get the receipt, the underground economy dries up. And so tying social or other policy to things like the renovation side of things to achieve those dual benefits is a great way, and as we've calculated, this can practically be cash neutral for the government. Tax credits, grant programs are often looked at like as a straight expense. That's not the case when you are bringing underground economy activity above board in the process.
I really appreciate
Thank you very much,
that.
Mr. Graywell.
Going on to housing and home building, one of your recommendations was support increased access for the first-time home buyers program. Housing is a big concern, whether you're in Vancouver, whether you're in Toronto, whether you're in Montreal. In the GTA, I come from Brampton East, which is a high growth area right now, and the price of houses in my riding from last year to this year has gone up by 25%. And that is just putting out of reach. And I'm 31 years old. All my friends are now getting into good jobs. They finished their master's degrees and they have, upper middle class incomes, in my opinion, but they can't afford a house where they grew up. So this is a massive challenge, I believe, not only for the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipal governments. Some further insight in one thing that you would like to see in this budget that would help address that problem.
The first thing to understand, especially in the GTA and in Vancouver, is the number one thing driving the problem right now is lack of supply. And Bob and I, just before coming over here, we were just looking at the latest stats, and there are 70% less low-rise houses on the market in the GTA at this time this year than there were last year. New. And so when you want to talk about simple economics and supply and demand, the reason why low-rise houses, in particular in the GTA and in Vancouver, are so expensive is supply and demand. And so there is the Fed, Prov, municipal action right now to study housing markets, and we're really glad for that because there's been a lot of misinterpretation of what the problem is. So really, some collaborative effort on addressing that and making sure also that Bob has also talked about the level of taxation, development charges in the GTA. I mean, when you're talking about $150,000 of tax on a $500,000 home, that's an exorbitant level of tax. And so some collaboration between all three levels of government to deal with supply issues, to make sure taxation is appropriate, and the investments in infrastructure, which can help offset that and create transit corridors that will enable people to move more efficiently. It's about productivity, it's about quality of life, all these things. Those are some areas that can make a big difference.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I totally agree with you.
On to the Home Builders Association, and I live in an oasis. I live in York Region. I'm from York Region, and it's busy. The builders are very busy there, but the problem is there's not enough tradespeople. And this is like this catch-22 situation where we don't have enough tradespeople, but we got people that aren't working, and even the folks that are being unemployed in Alberta that unfortunately have lost their jobs, even the folks that are returning to Ontario aren't sufficient. And you're not just going to move from Alberta to Ontario because the price of housing, and to resettle in Ontario from Alberta, there's a little discrepancy there because it's very expensive to move into York Region, some places in Toronto. So and I've been pushing in terms of how we get more people, more young people into the trades. And I call it, the term I once heard was parity of esteem, if I can use that term. Are there any pilot projects that we can advocate for, latch onto? Because I think in the next 10 years, maybe even less, and I have great relationships with both the builders and the unions, and I hear it from both sides. I think next year we're going to lose not even the labor, we're going to lose a wealth of experience that just isn't there. It's like losing that senior management, but you have no middle managers coming up the ranks that are learning, and we need to do something about it. And I know this is provincial, federal combined, but there's got to be something we do. So can you spend 20 seconds on that?
Well, you're absolutely right. We're going to lose 118,000 workers over the last decade in residential construction. Some of them are apprenticeable trades. Some of them are not. A lot of them are just skilled workers, and that's common in every industry. And so what we need to do is encourage people to get into skilled work and skilled trades. We're doing work with Colleges and Institutes Canada. There is a role for the federal government to promote that kind of thing and guide people, and not as a second choice. You don't go to college to study a trade and get into skilled work because you couldn't get into university. You go there because it's just as good as going to university.
The remuneration for a welder, carpenter, foreman is actually a lot better than a lot of the other occupations people may think about.